Hello and welcome to this Stories in the Room, where we take a look behind the speaking industry and the colleagues who work in it. So I'm always joined with my incredible friend and incredible communications architect, global storyteller, and journalist, Rod Berger, Dr. Rod Berger. Rod, my friend, thank you so much for joining me for another incredible conversation here.
Nice to see you, Marjana. Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I'm just thrilled that these have gone so well, and we continue to kind of have to, set people up, right? Sort of get in line for these conversations. It says to me that the industry really wants to have them and
Yeah.
learn about the people that are the leaders in this space. So I'm definitely looking forward to this conversation today. It should be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I really like to start these also with, it's about stories in the room. So I want to get your story, a little update. What's been going on in your world?
It's all about travel. I just got back. I'm on this book tour with Jason Feltz, who was CEO of Virgin Entertainment with Richard Branson, and he's got a book tour. So I'm doing these moderated hybrid keynotes with him, and was just down at the University of Central Florida. And because we're having some issues with air traffic control in this country, I
Mm.
could have flown to East Asia and back,
Okay.
not just Nashville to Orlando, but today I am headed to Dallas after this for my hybrid keynote with Opal Lee. And
Yeah.
the grandmother of Juneteenth, she won the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and she's been a Nobel Prize nominee. So high stakes, but I'm very excited for us to get in front of about, I think, like 2,000 people in Dallas. So that should be a
Yeah.
really fun experience.
That's fantastic. I love
Yeah.
this. I love that you're doing this hybrid keynote. It speaks to, again, what we're doing in the industry. Everybody is thinking about doing things a little bit differently. How do we elevate the conversations a little bit differently? And just like, to put a finer note on it, what are you finding is really working about this? And I really want people to understand this is very different from just your typical moderated Q&A. This goes a little deeper. There's a little more experiential vibe to this.
Yeah.
And what's the best way you could kind of describe it?
I think historically, if you've had someone up moderating a luminary, right, they're focusing on what I would call press release bullet points. So they're sort of softballs. They're teeing it up so that, Marjana, you're the expert and you already know what I'm going to say, and we're just going to kind of facilitate that conversation. But for me, I'm not interested in that, right? Because people can read that. They can see it in your promos, your brochures, your website, your books. But what they can't get is the behind the scenes, like your story. And so my goal is to capture in real time that story so that the audience feels like it's an exclusive experience. Like what I
Yeah.
just did at UCF, we did that. If I did it today, it would be a very different experience for a very different audience because I don't go in with a prescribed set of questions. I do my homework on Jason, and then I break that down. And in the moment, we sort of go with the flow of that energy. And the result has been really great. So I'm a kid in a candy shop because you're really capturing sort of the why of people. And I think a lot of people are looking for authenticity. And if I'm
So
just
true.
running down bullet points, at some point there's a lifespan on it. There's an expiration date, like on your milk, right? You sort of
Yeah.
say, now, what do I remember? But if I capture your story, you're going to have an emotional connection with that speaker, and you're going to want to then go buy their book or work with them after
Mm,
the event.
yeah.
So yeah, it's gotten great response. Thank you for bringing
Yeah.
it up.
Yeah, no, I love that energy. It makes me think about just even when I do exploratory calls, those first calls with a speaker, it's that again, the authenticity, the vulnerability, that just this question led to that question or that answer, and just go deeper, and you go down that rabbit hole together. And it's really engaging. Sometimes I'm like, oh, we should just turn the camera on this conversation
And
to
you know
let
what's fun
people
for the
know more
speaker
about you.
too, Marjana, what's fun for that luminary is that they are so relaxed because
Yeah.
they don't have there's not like talking points they have to memorize, or they're worried that they got off the plane. Like, they can
Hmm.
just be themselves in that moment. And I think you get a different experience. And we live in a world where that's what everybody wants, right? You want the behind the scenes. I'm a big
Yeah.
sports fan. NBA All-Star weekend we just had that. And so you want to see what the players are doing. It's all the behind the scenes. So
Mm.
kind of
Well,
translating that in this formal environment.
yeah, I love that. And I want everyone to know who's watching this that this is exactly how Rod does it here, too. He never calls me and says, hey, give me the scoop on Alec. And oh boy, Alec from Gotham Artists,
There's a
well, I have a
scoop on
scoop.
Alec.
No, I am but so excited about this conversation today. But I love it because even I'm like, where do you look? You got some good mad sleuthing skills. That's all I can say. And it's one of the reasons I enjoy these conversations with you too, because I don't know what you're gonna do. And it's one of the reasons I just toss the rest of the show to you after this opening. So, thank you so much for sharing that. I think this kind of moderated keynote conversation experience is something that more agencies are looking at. And I love that you're out there doing more of this kind of work. So thank you for that. So without further ado, let's bring in our guest today, Alec Julian Melman, Gotham Artists. I mean, he is the CEO and co-founder. And just personally, I just want to share what I have really loved about Gotham and watching them grow over the years and growing, a collegial relationship with Alec and friendship and just industry insights that we share with one another. He's always thinking outside the box. He's always open to a collaborative brainstorm. He is real and raw. I've been in a lot of rooms where he said things where I'm like, whoa, and I'm like, this is good. I like this can of worms that has been opened. And I really want to encourage anyone that's here in the room live today, if you have questions, this is the day to drop them in the comments. Do not be shy. This is the man that's going to lay it out for you straight. I'm looking forward, Rod, to whatever questions you have with Alec, but let's bring Alec in because I have one sort of kickoff question and then let's take it wherever it goes. Alec, welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. What a nice introduction.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun today. Listen, I just want to kick off with a question that I think a lot of us in the industry, we're just all kind of sharing these days, which is we're shifting, we're form shifting. There's a lot happening in the industry. There's a lot of things that are changing and growing in unique ways. There are collaborations that are forming, a lot of different things. So I'm just kind of dying to know, what are you seeing in the industry that strikes you as really different today than even 3 years ago, 5 years ago? Is there anything that stands out for you right now that we should be paying more attention to?
Great question. And no, we did not prepare in advance. I did not get any of these questions in advance. I'll give you my very candid response. The biggest change I'm seeing is just a flood of new speakers in the market. I feel like there's more speakers than ever. I like to joke sometimes there's not going to be any audience left. Everyone's going to be on stage. So that is the biggest change. And in a way, it's a great thing for an agency like ours because it makes our job that much more valuable to a meeting planner to help, figure out the wheat from the chaff for who's really going to deliver for your audience and who isn't. So I think that's the biggest change we're seeing is there's just that many more speakers in the marketplace. I think our database has grown now to over 6,000 speakers that we have. And those are just the ones that we know about. I've been doing this 15 years and I learned about a new speaker almost every day.
Yeah. Well, let's stay on that for a minute because, I've always said that I feel like in this, again, globalized world, as much as there are issues going out there, we need potentially as many voices as are brave enough to step on a stage or in any community to share a story that can impact a life, right? And listen, we always talk about that. Maybe you're not meant for the stage where you're getting paid, you're 10,000, 50, whatever. But you're meant for some stage potentially. You're meant for some community. There's different layers of this. Do you feel that right now with the surge of speakers that we have enough opportunities out there to help them understand what their lane is so that, again, we're helping the industry because everybody has their right lane and we're not confusing the industry? Do you think we're doing that well as an industry?
There's a couple ways to answer that. I mean, we're primarily what you'd call a buyer-focused agency. So we don't have a lot of exclusive speakers. We're almost entirely non-exclusive. So, we're very much a supermarket and we're very much answering the needs of what our buyers are. And they vary so much from a college to an association to a corporation to international. So their needs are so different. So I think our value comes from just knowing so many different options for them and then finding the right place. I mean, a lot of people think they know what they want and they have an idea in mind. And by the time we're done, it's something completely different. A lot of times they're looking for a name, which is harder and harder to get, especially with budget constraints. The biggest names have the highest prices, obviously. So we try and focus people on what you'd call those surprise and delight speakers. And it's most of the meetings we're working on, you have an audience is already built in. It's either an internal corporate event or it's a large conference that you're going to have attendees regardless of the speaker. So why don't you get someone amazing that no one's ever heard of instead of someone huge that could wind up only being a disappointment, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, gosh, I love that. The surprise and delight speakers. And it's another reason why, again, meeting planners working with speakers bureaus is so important, because you do know the players on stage and off stage. There's so much that you could share. And also, if you're a good agency, you're paying attention to current events, you're paying attention to what matters, and you become what we've been talking about here, become a thought leader partner. And tell us a little bit about, like with Gotham, I kind of feel like that's what your team does. Like the relationships that you've built with your clients. I do really believe that you're not just, waiting for someone to call you and it's like, oh, it's that time of year again where we're booking speakers, but your agents are really becoming thought leaders. And I've seen this even in the posts that you're doing online, but can you share a little bit of that evolution with us?
Well, it's like that old trope about 10,000 hours, the Malcolm Gladwell idea. I was like, I've been doing it for 15 years now, 18, including my past life. So, it's like I've only gotten better at it. I've only learned, and so have all the agents. We've had, our colleague Mike just celebrated 15 years here, and Max 8 years. That was just yesterday. So we have people who have just institutional knowledge that is that's what people I think are using us for. It's like we have that insight that's like, oh, that speaker, here's why we maybe should consider someone else, or like, here's where this person is really strong, and this is why you should do a Q&A moderated conversation and not a keynote with this person. That kind of institutional knowledge is not easily transferable to a database. So we only get better at what we do the more we do it.
Yeah, I love that. Institutional knowledge, that is key. And Rod, before I pass off to you, there's a question that came in. How do you identify a surprise and delight speaker?
Ironically, I don't know if it's ironic or not, but very often our best buyers are educating us about new speakers. And and some of our dear colleagues in the industry, like you, Mirjana, who clue us in on someone before they've kind of popped, and we get to know them. And usually, to talk in more specific numerical terms, like you're talking about someone who's going to be under 25K. Usually it's not their big slot. It's, one of the smaller slots, and you have an opportunity where they already have, like I said, a fixed audience that's there, a captive audience, if you will. And it's word of mouth. We'll have one agent will have a good event with a speaker, and they'll tell the other 9 agents here, and they'll tell their buyers, and that's how you kind of grow a bit of a tidal wave with someone.
Yeah, definitely that bit of spin, or just hearing it from your colleagues. Absolutely. Well, listen, I think the fun is going to begin now when I kind of toss this over to Rod. No pressure, Rod. But you take it away. We'll do some more industry kind of conversation too from some of these perspectives. But I always love this part where Rod is going to surprise and delight us with what he brings up next.
Thank you, Mirjana. Well, Alec Baldwin, it is so nice to spend time. I'm a little nervous. I love your films.
Close enough.
Look, I will say this. In researching you, Alec, I said to myself, you may be the Dos Equis man of the speaker bureau industry. You have such an interesting background. First of all, I want to know, tell me about Brussels. You spent a brief amount of time there. Did you get sent back to the U.S.? Was there some special agent story there?
Oh, you do your research. No, that was my college study abroad, actually, which, believe it or not, I got there August 2001, and then not 3 weeks later was 9/11, and I was in Europe for that. And they were thinking of canceling the program. They didn't, and it wound up being some of the most formative months of my life, being in Brussels at that time with 9 other Americans, and we're still close. A few of us are still very close to this day. So that was an important chance to see the world to see America from the world's eyes. And I came back to a very changed country, but I wouldn't change that for the world. It also got me out of Maryland, which I was not loving at the time. So very fond memories of Brussels.
So thank you for sharing that. That says a lot about you and the lens I think that you take towards working with people. I know that you said off air, you were talking about, and I've seen some of this, that some of your initial interest was around entertainment and producing and writing. How does Gotham for you scratch that itch? And did you have to sort of change your perspective in the way in which you would think about collaborating, right? I know you're a big Dale Carnegie fan and how to, influence folks, the classic book. And I'm just curious as to that frame, right? So that creative element of you and how that is expressed now in a way that not only influences and supports buyers, but helps to identify that talent that maybe, it didn't know that they were really as good as maybe they ended up being.
Oh, that's a interesting question. So yeah, that just to back it up for a minute, like I thought I'd be a writer or something like that. And then I said, well, if that's not going to happen, and I'll go to law school, which for better or worse, turned out to be for better in the end. But I said, okay, let me focus on entertainment law so that I can help some of my very talented friends one day. And that is how I stumbled into this industry, because I wound up getting a part-time job during law school for an entertainment lawyer, and he was the lawyer for Greater Talent Network, which was a speakers bureau. And I said, what's a speakers bureau? And that's how I even found out this industry existed. Went to work there through that. So I do owe law school for helping me find my calling in life. And I left there with a partner, Daniel. We started Gotham together in 2009. So that's how we got to this. And then as far as the creative itch, that's one of the things I love about this job. Every day is like I get to work with such interesting people and the people that change the world in a lot of ways. So I find that to be very rewarding. And I like to joke, but it's not really a joke, especially pre-COVID when we were in Manhattan and you would walk to the office and everyone has this dour look on their face and I'm like skipping to work. I'm so happy. I feel like I figured out some kind of secret. Just being able to work with the people that you admire and respect. I mean, for example, like we work with some of the biggest names out there, but I don't think I was ever more excited than when I got to meet Mike Reese, the producer of The Simpsons, which is like my favorite show. So
You
like
love
things
that.
like
Yeah,
that. Yeah. So that type of thing really means a lot to me. And then other times I'm stuck looking at an indemnification clause for the 300th time, and I turn to a colleague and I say, "This is why I got into the entertainment industry."
So if I'm a cynic or if I'm talking to people in the industry from the speaker side, maybe the buyer side too, and I want to dive into that, you'll get people that, and I love that we're going to run out of audience. That's so well put. I think for so many in the industry, just in the way in which we experience people. How do you think about it? Because I think a cynic might say, you know what, the bureaus, the agents, they want everything in a prescriptive sort of laid out blueprint. They don't want to be, they're not as creative, right? They're just looking to take a modular sort of approach and plug and play. But what I'm hearing from you is that now this is me saying it, so correct me if I'm wrong, but that in essence, you're okay with an organized chaos from a creative perspective. That's the whiteboarding side of you. That's the, let's see what we have here. We may not have sort of classic ingredients, but maybe something amazing is going to come from that. Is that a fair read of you and sort of the approach that Gotham takes? Because I hear so many people, when I was at the airport, just from that trip I just had, chatting with someone and they said, I'm thinking of getting into the speaking industry. Rod, how do I get my book published? And I thought, God, we all have those conversations. So how do you, is that a fair read of you and Gotham? And does that give you what I would imagine is a competitive edge?
It's a bit of controlled chaos, which I like. I mean, I work well in that space. I kind of grew up with a lot of chaos. So like I have a high tolerance for it, I would say. And it's maybe my comfort zone. There's also like a ton of autonomy, right? There's a lot of like that results oriented work environment type of mentality where it's like the agents, if they're doing their thing, they're closing. I'm not micromanaging. They have a lot of freedom to work in the way that is most suitable to them. And if they work best from the beach, then work from the beach. I'm not going to argue with you on that. So there's a lot of like hands-off approach, which is, I think it creates the best work environment and people aren't looking over your shoulder. And we're too small an organization to be, everyone has to be taking care of themselves to some degree. I'm here to support, but I'm not going to check how many phone calls you made in a day or see how many emails you sent.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that sort of that creative environment, more maybe like a Google environment or something, at least where there's an opportunity to be creative. how do you, I'm so curious, Alec, how do you sift through this sort of synthetic environment that I'm finding, which is there are so many consultants, there are groups that will help you create, in essence, what I call a fake reel, sizzle reel. Like there's so many ways that you can almost AI your way to a stage.
Mm-hmm.
And now look, if I'm you, I would almost be nervous to some degree, because if I have a buyer that buys that speaker, do I really have any, like, how do I know they're going to be what they've purported to be? How have you dealt with that? Even your contemporaries in other bureaus and agencies, when you've had conversations maybe off the record, how do you think about that?
I call it the catch 22 of speaking, which is, it's like, in order to be recommended, you need to be validated. And the only way to be validated is to have done speaking engagement. So it's like, you need to have gotten stages so that we can recommend you. But how are you going to get stages if we haven't recommended you? And it's like any speaker, and I tell this to every speaker I talk to that's trying to break into the business, if you can solve for that, you'll make it. And a lot of it is you have to have done it on your own for a while by, at least doing 10, 15 gigs a year on your own before a bureau even starts to make sense for you. And the people who are doing it on their own like that, then they already have a little bit of a track record that we can trust. And then again, that first event to a large degree is a leap of faith. It's a calculated, educated guess, but it's a leap of faith that they're going to deliver on what they say they're going to deliver. Now we have a short list of names we don't recommend anymore, but by and large, people do deliver on what they promise they will.
I love that I have not heard anybody talk about sort of those initial 10 to 15, right? Like that to me that says a lot about you, and that honesty. I think a lot of folks are looking for transparency with the people that are seen as a gatekeeper. That doesn't mean that that's their mentality, but you've worked hard enough to develop this platform and experience with your buyer. Traditionally, speakers have thought, I've got to have my book. And then I've got to have my TEDx talk, and right. Sort of, you check these boxes. I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I'm a sports nut. And so we'll sort of take the box score analogy. Is there a box score or a way that you might look at it post game, that you look at a certain group of statistics or areas for a potential speaker that make a difference for you outside of the traditional book, TEDx talk, sort of slick marketing? What can we glean from what you're looking at in a box score?
I mean, I'm mostly looking at how much revenue you're already producing. If I'm going to be candid, I've said this at other events where it's like,
that's the New Yorker in you. I know you.
Yeah. The guy who walks into the apartment is like, how much do you pay for rent? So similarly, it's like this is a 20 to 25% industry, right? That is like the standard commission that bureaus make. And so if you're, as a speaker, already doing, let's say, $100,000 annually, if that was running through a bureau, the bureau would stand to make maybe $20,000 on top line. And then there's expenses in running those things. So like, it has to make sense financially to dive in with someone like that. And so that's why I think it's so important that speakers need to have a book of business already. As I also semi-jokingly have told speakers, by the time you need a bureau, you don't need a bureau anymore. You know what I mean? It's like you've already gotten into a rhythm. And what a bureau really does best is take administrative load off. They're not great, in my experience, in generating new business and new leads. They're great at taking someone who's got way too busy of a schedule and helping handle the administrative load of it, the calendaring, the logistics, things like that. That's really what a bureau excels at in many ways.
See, that to me speaks to your confidence, because when I think about you saying that and being so transparent, I cannot think of others folks in your chair that are that transparent, because potentially they're worried they're going to miss out on some needle in a haystack from a talent perspective. And or they don't ever want to lose that sort of pipeline, right? That let's continue to build that roster of talent, because those watching and listening to us, they're going to immediately evaluate whether or not they reach out to Gotham, maybe because they go, all right, maybe I'm not ready yet, or wow, I am ready. Do you have conversations with your contemporaries where it's like, hey, Alec, pump the brakes a little bit here. We don't want everybody thinking that they've got to have a certain level of success already before they come to us.
We have too much supply as it is. So and trust me, I've definitely lost out on people who have gone on to very successful speaking careers. And in some cases, it's even like they were better off as a non-exclusive than they were as an exclusive,
Really?
right? Like, for whatever reason, they just clicked better when they were. Sometimes certain speakers who are fantastic, they're their own best advocate. Like, they can sell their program better than any agent could, certainly better than I could. And so when they were working under us, it wasn't as lucrative to them or as successful as when they were non-exclusive and working with lots of different agents and agencies.
Let's talk about the buyer, because I know that is the focus. How has the buyer's dilemma changed since you started in the industry, and what would you attribute to that maybe change in the way in which they think about engaging speakers?
Oh man, this is where I could spend all day. And this was true 15 years ago, right? When I first started in the industry, it was like just the start of social media and social networks and LinkedIn and all these things. And what really started to happen was there was no water cooler moments anymore. There's people who are famous to, let's say, 2 million people, and they are so famous, and to the other 300 million Americans, they've never heard of them. And so you have this, like, it's much harder to find a water cooler name, right? Someone who everybody knows. And that's something that a big conference producer is looking for. They want a name that's instantly recognizable. I think I heard the expression silhouette recognizable. Just by their silhouette, you know who it is. And that seems to be farther and fewer between than ever before. And so I think the dilemma is finding names big enough while still staying in budget. And you have to go to the really highest ends. I mean, there's always a couple of names that we all know that, major celebrities, sure, but it's not like it used to be. And the other dilemma, and this has always been true, I feel like meeting planners, they're often operating from a place of fear, from a place of like concern, like this is their job on the line. They're about to put someone on stage in front of their customers, in front of their CEO, in front of their most important stakeholders. Like, they have a lot riding on this. So they're inclined to make safe decisions. They're not trying to take a risk on some new idea, usually. And that's a hard dilemma, because at the same time, they want to challenge their audience and have something exciting and provocative. You don't want to just keep doing the same old thing, but it's a big risk. And I understand that risk. So a lot of our job is reassuring them, like, this is a good program. Trust me, you're going to put someone on stage, and your boss is going to love them. Your audience is going to love them, and you're going to love them.
So in essence, you can't take for granted that they know what they want, to your earlier point. In essence, that questions on your side of the table have to be really thoughtful to help, I guess, extrapolate maybe what they're really trying to go for, but maybe they don't even know it because that's just not their window of expertise.
Often they come in with like a North Star. We want someone like this.
Right.
Like, we want Martha Stewart, and we have, 50K.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. Can't get Martha, but we can get you someone.
She'll walk from one side of the stage to the next. That'll be
your keynote. So a lot of times it's going to be one of two things. They have a specific name in mind, and we're going to try and get that name for them, or they have an idea. They have a general, like, we're looking for someone in this topic area, in this budget. And then that's where we can really shine with our collective institutional knowledge of like 10 excellent ideas that we can share with them. And then it goes back to a board and they decide together. But the names we're putting on there are names that we've all vetted already, that we know if they pick any one of those 10, we'll be happy with it. We're not going to put a dud up onto that list. And then the real dilemma for us is when they come back with a name we've never heard of and say, someone on the board said they really want this person. And we're like, okay, sure. And then we get them that person, and then that person isn't good. And then they're mad at us. So that's our dilemma.
Hey, Rod, may I jump in for a quick second here? I just back to something that Alec, you said, that bureaus are not sometimes great at generating new leads, right? So the thing about bureaus, right, you have a lot of great clients in there. And I love that you made this point, because I think it speaks to something that any speaker listening, how can speakers potentially be better partners then in helping their bureau agencies, especially if they're exclusive, and even if they're non-exclusive, come up with potential ideas of something interesting to share with clients to generate leads. Because, I truly believe that if I were an agent working for your agent, if you hired me tomorrow, Alec, right? One of the things I would want to do is think about ways to be that thought leader partner to those clients and come up with some new innovative things to share with them, to create the water cooler conversations for them that they get excited to bring to their people and get that engagement going. Do you feel that the problem is that agents are just too busy churning on contracts that are coming in? Or is there a way that we could figure this conundrum out, and maybe it requires a different level of partnership and conversation with the speaker and an agent or their agency? Just, this is something that just keeps coming up, and I just feel like there's got to be a solution.
Man, here comes the cynic again. I'm gonna say it's like, all right, fine. This isn't going out live anywhere. So especially I'll speak for non-exclusive bureaus. I'll speak for Gotham. I'm not going to speak for any other agency, but I find a lot of time we're very talent agnostic. It's like, it's not to say I don't care who they book, but I'm much more interested that they book it through Gotham than I am in who they actually decide on, right? Because, well, like I said, we'll give them 10 names, and I'll say, of these 10, I'm really a big fan of, these 3, let's say, or I just had a great event, or someone at our company had a great event with this person recently. But as long as they're picking one of those 10, we're generally happy. And so, and that's going to be different for an exclusive bureau. They really have an obligation, and we certainly have an obligation to the 5 exclusives that we have to promote them first and foremost. And the reason we have those 5 is because we believe in them, and we believe that they can do almost any stage and do it well. And that's why we work with them. And they're also genuinely nice people that we like working with. So as far as what the speakers can do to help, I mean, the best speakers know that, like, when you sign with an agency, or it's the beginning of your hard work, not the end of your hard work, right? That's when the best speakers are the ones who are going to be as double down on their thought leadership, their content. They're not going to wait around for Gotham to make 100 calls on their behalf. We always encourage the exclusives we have. We want you to have relationships with the other bureaus. They're our colleagues in the industry. We're not trying to operate from a scarcity mindset. We're going to go from an abundance mindset. So, like, I want our exclusives to have direct relationships with the agents at other companies, that they can ask them. I mean, please CC us when you have a date check or something like that. But I'm not scared that they're going to, like, steal our exclusives or anything. I think it's a win-win if they have direct relationships, and that builds trust. And so, the best speakers are the ones who are going to continue to promote themselves and do thought leadership and do all the social media outreach and the, for example, after an event, we want our speakers to shake hands and get as many business cards as they can, and then send us those business cards, and we'll follow up together. Sometimes the buyer, they don't want to deal with an agent. They feel like they want to deal with the talent. Okay, deal with the talent. And when the offer comes in, we'll paper it for you, and you can have a direct relationship with the talent. So the speakers that work with us, they know that. They know that they're going to have to put in as much work, if not more, than what the agency's doing.
Yeah, no, I think, and I know, Rod, there are questions coming in, so we definitely want to get to those, but yeah, I agree with you, Alec. I think the part that everybody has to remember, it is a partnership. And if you get signed to an exclusive agency, there is work to be done on the back end of that. You still have to be out there promoting yourself, getting great video of yourself, sharing that back with your agency, and sharing some of those ideas of the case studies of the things that these agents can talk about and sell. So thank you for that. Rod, I don't know if you wanted to. Yeah.
Well, I want to tie in. We're getting a number of questions that seem to be around a similar theme, Alec, which is this notion of what do you see in the trends we talked about a little bit earlier, sort of this having to look slick or having to sort of manufacture this presence that a speaker thinks or hopes that they're trying to convey, so that someone like you or an agent or another bureau is going to say, we're going to take this person, put them on our roster, and represent them in some form or fashion. I guess the twist on that, the first part of that question would be, are you having the same experience? Because I'll see all these folks, reaching out to me, and I know Marjana's had these experiences, and I'm sure you have, where it's like, okay, are they really agencies? Are they just agents? Like, there's so many people representing, in air quotes, speakers, and does that muddy the water from the bureau side, the agency side? In essence, are you potentially as frustrated as maybe I might be from the speaking side, because everybody wants to be a speaker, everybody has the best materials?
I mean, that'll sort itself out. I feel like you can already tell. You take one look at a video, you're like, that was manufactured. You'll know quickly whether it's real or not.
So it's
One
too
phone call
sharp.
there's too sharp. There's that feeling of sameness. Like where things just look too similar to one another, and there's too much like everyone goes and runs to one side of the boat at the same time. It's like, you can't all be AI speakers. How did that happen? So there's like a feeling of if there's too much sameness, if there's too much similarity between these speakers, not just in terms of content, but in terms of look, in terms of the website, in terms of the reel, then you wind up becoming, fungible and not noticeable, and you don't stand out. And so you have to zig where others are zagging as a speaker.
See, that's very confirmatory to me, I think. And I would imagine other speakers hearing that. That's going to be, it's going to allow us to breathe a little bit, because I like that you're saying to zag when people are going, that makes a lot of sense. Yes, Marjana.
Sorry. I know it's hard. I'm like voice of God, maybe like, just, I don't want to interrupt, but I do want to say though, that it is like those sizzle reels. It's just, again, we always say, another arrow in your quiver. You need it. There's got to be a way. So maybe, Alec, to your point, maybe people can figure out a way to curate the content in those sizzle reels differently. But I will say there's so many times where there are the buyers who have to bring a speaker back to their stakeholders, and you just need that like quick hit of something that captures all of it in one. So I don't want, and I don't even know that you're saying this, but let's align on this. I don't want people walking away thinking, oh, I don't really need to do that or spend money on that or whatever. You don't have to spend a lot of money on it either. Spend where you can spend, but you have to make an investment in your career. And if you want to be a speaker, especially what we call a road warrior speaker, this is your job, your livelihood, the thing you care about most. You need to make those investments in the right ways. So how do you balance that then?
Okay, I'll challenge that. Let's say it costs, just for argument's sake, let's say it costs $10,000 to make a really polished speaker reel. I could make a good faith argument that you could take that $10,000 and put it into SEO or AdWords and get a better result. And I feel like my old boss, Don Epstein at Greater Talent, used to say, don't send them the video. Video only talks people out of a speech. They only talks people out of a speaker. They look at it and they're like, well, A, I've already seen this. Now I know what they talk about. B, I didn't like this. I didn't like that. It's a static object that won't necessarily move the needle, not nearly as much as an in-person meeting, a phone call, a Zoom to meet with the speaker. That is where you should be spending your time. If you can get a potential buyer. I mean, what used to be the case pre-COVID was, we won't get on a pre-offer call. We're not going to do that. You send the offer and then we'll talk. And now it's like, you'd be dumb not to get on a pre-offer call. Let's talk. Let's see if I'm the right fit. And if you're not willing to dedicate 20, 30 minutes to that, I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Wise words by Don then, but the fact that there's so many people in the marketplace now with lots of videos, that the thing is, we're up against, these speakers are up against, like, again, so much competition with so many of these reels out there that, again, we know there are plenty of buyers who are like, ooh, that looks hot. That person looks hot. And to your point, again, this is why I work with a speakers bureau who knows that speaker on and off the stage. But it's just an interesting time that we're living through with it all.
That's a good way to get a couple of quick, wins, but that's sprinting and not a marathon, where it's like, oh, they had a slick video, but then if they can't actually follow up and deliver on a stage in front of 2,000 people, well, then you had one good gig and that was it. So
but maybe paid for that reel.
And paid for the reel. Exactly. Whereas like honing your craft is going to be, there's no substitute for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a question, Alec, from one of your speakers, asking about how to stay top of mind. What's the best way to do that? And that's a great question, because I think there's this feeling of you're sort of out in the ether and you don't know how to stay in contact or top of mind with either sort of the buyers or people that are looking for that kind of topic, and or those that are representing you or you're collaborating with.
Yeah, or the agents themselves, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So we are very easily bribed by candy and cookies. I swear to God, these little gifts that people send, it goes somewhere. Don't send books. Please stop sending books, is all I ask. We have enough books. I got all the books I could ever need. We'll ask if we want the books. But all kidding aside, like, there's those little things go, our friend Josh Linkner is the king of this. He's great at, sending you a birthday present and just thinking about you when you're not even thinking about yourself. And, that goes a long way. And as far on a more serious note, in terms of staying top of mind, continuing to be consistent thought leader, right? Sending as the news is changing and your topic is relative to that news, to put out a newsletter or put out a blurb and social media and tag us and make sure that we reshare that, and making sure that we remember that you are relevant for that topic. So I would say constant, as my dear colleague Lori would say, constant gentle pressure.
Constant gentle pressure. No, I like that. I think there's a persistence about that achieves that. Let's sort of take a left turn here, literally. Talk about I love that. It says a lot about you that you ride your bike, maybe not in the winter, right? But you ride your bike to work, right? So tell me just about that. I mean, is it a sort of a creative outlet for you to be able to think and take in the world? Because this world of speaking and thought leadership is so stimulus rich. It's like there's so much. Think about just like walking through talking points all day long. What does it do for you to be able to have that time alone?
That is the time where I don't have to think. And that's what I really like about it. It clears my mind. You have to really concentrate so you don't die. And it's my way of staying connected to the city. I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and now I live in North Jersey suburbs. So this is my way of feeling like I'm still a New Yorker. I bike the streets. And as you said, not now. I'll start again in April. But it's I don't know. It's the best way to feel connected to any city. Anytime I visit another place, I hope it's one of those towns that has a bike share system, and I just ride around everywhere. From, I did it in Montreal, I did it in London, wherever there's a bike system, you can find me riding on it. So that's my moment of Zen, my hour of Zen every day. Yeah.
Well, I know we're kind of on the back stretch of our chat today, but are there? I mean, I'll ask sort of the basic question of this, but just curious as to the trends that you're seeing. I mean, I love, you brought up a great point. Like all of a sudden everybody's an expert in AI, right? So there are those topical sort of the magnet of these topics that pulls people in one direction or another. Is there a blind spot that we're not either paying attention to that we need to be aware of as an industry, and or a trend that you think is around the corner? It may not be in the immediate, but it is sort of, it's on the come, and maybe that has to do with remote presentations. I don't know what that might look like, but something that we're not paying attention to now that maybe we should be.
Well, if we're talking trends in like topics necessarily, I mean, the employee engagement thing remains, I feel like, as relevant as ever. I feel like happy employees make for productive companies is like a message that'll never go out of style. And so you just see a lot of that. You see a lot on leadership, remains like an evergreen category. So if you're in those two, good for you, but you have a lot of competition. So finding a space where there aren't a lot of people already is very a wise move if you can find it.
So, and what would work, before we go to sort of maybe the trends in the industry, how do you advise those speakers that you work with that are in areas that are all of a sudden a no-go, like DEI right now, right? Where it's getting dropped by organizations across the board.
See, I'll challenge that. I was going to bring that up actually.
Oh, good. Please do. So I'm just curious, because if I was a speaker in that space, I know executive coaches that are finding that all of a sudden things are dried up because corporations don't know exactly how to approach that. And if that's your book, if that's your expertise, and you have a book of business as a speaker in that area or an area that is being challenged, is there a way you can zig or zag away from that?
I would say you remain calm if you're a DEI speaker. I feel like the pendulum always swings way too hard one way and then way too hard back the other way. But the biggest companies know that a diverse workforce, or workforce that's representative of the people they serve and of the country, is going to be a stronger workforce. And so while they may publicly be shying away from DEI, or at least the term DEI, I don't think that they're really going to stop. In fact, I think some companies might double down. I just saw something that McKinsey is like doubling down on their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So I feel like that'll remain relevant, even if you have to change, the name. A rose by any other name is still sweet. So if they don't call it DEI and they call it something else like human capital or something like that, it'll still be, I think, a very relevant topic. And I think a lot of companies also, they're going to push back against this narrative. And now they're going to find it's more important than ever to support their DEI initiatives, regardless of how much they scrub their website.
Got it. Good point. Good point. And then trends for the industry. Are you seeing anything that we should be paying attention to?
It's an industry that, has been ripe for disruption for a long time. And, COVID certainly did that. And then I was a bit disappointed to see things kind of go back to the way they were. I thought there'd be more permanent change. One, I think, and this could just be my lower middle class Brooklyn upbringing, saying the fees are way too high, I think, for most speakers. I can't believe anyone gets paid this much money to speak personally, and I'm happy I found this industry, but it's always a surprising shock to me how much you can make.
Like where
speaking.
The comma goes? Wait, what?
Yeah. And it's like, we were just dealing with this with a colleague at another industry, and we had to stop and laugh for a second. It's like, we're dealing with like basically a glorified Zoom call, and it's going to cost $50,000. I can't believe this. So I would like to see the numbers come down a little, right? I think that is, and you would think with all this added supply, with all these new speakers coming to the market, that would help lower those numbers, but it's somehow still a race to the top because people, like I said, the meeting planners are looking for ever bigger and splashier names. And so they keep driving up the fees. And, part of me is like, that's ridiculous. And then the business owner in me is saying, that's fantastic. So, so I'm torn between those two worlds. And then other trends coming up. No, that's the thing. It needs, it's been kind of in a steady rhythm for some time. I could imagine some level of consolidation coming. There's always talk of like, let's say private equity coming in and scooping up, because there's the market's very like broken up into a bunch of mom and pops, a bunch of mid-size, and then a couple of big heavy hitters. And that there could be a world in which someone with a very large bankroll could like roll up several companies into one to get market share. But I don't know, every company is like, a small business, a mom and pop business they have very unique personality. It wouldn't necessarily work that they could just be smushed together with 10 other agencies. But there's probably people thinking about that.
Well, what I love, and Mirjana, I'll pass it back to you if we want to put a wrap on any remaining questions, is that from my perspective, Alec, what I appreciate is we talk about authenticity from speakers, but I think we forget about those that are the leaders in the space that are helping to provide the opportunities for speakers and thought leaders to get on stages. And there's an authenticity about you that I genuinely appreciate. I mean, I couldn't believe when I was reading background on you and doing research that you have publicly talked about when you started Gotham with Daniel, you went and got a loan of $15,000 from your sister. That's just not something that I read or hear or see from folks in your position very often, if ever. And that to me says something in a world that is completely flooded with agents and agencies and bureaus and speakers. It's like, all right, that's different. And I think that that's really key. I'm sure that's probably one of the reasons why a lot of your buyers, they stay within the family, that repeat business element, right? And so I think that for me, Mirjana, that comes full circle, that I don't want that to go sort of just in the ether that, oh, that's really nice. No, that to me separates Alec from so many.
Yeah, absolutely. No, definitely. And listen, I know that we're on wrap here. There's one really important question that was asked in the room that I want to make sure we have you answer, Alec. With the massive amount of speakers in the audience, what can we do to activate buyer demand? So again, back to what can speakers do to help activate more of that buyer demand?
You cannot induce demand. It is not possible. You have to, like I said, the catch-22 earlier, you have to bust your butt. You have to get out there to as many events. If you're not getting paid for gigs, do free gigs, get video, get reel, get testimonials. Word of mouth is going to be your best asset, and you can only get that by putting yourself out there and going to as many events and speaking at as many free events and calling in every favor that you possibly can. The first booking I ever got as an agent was through my sister. A friend of hers worked at a marketing agency, and she was able to send something to me. So use your network, I would say, as much as you can, and rely on them first. But if there was some magic spell to induce demand, I would have used it already.
That's such a great point, though. The community, use your connections. I mean, I'll share, and I've been sharing this like off the side with you guys conversationally, but even for me, I mean, in my own town, I have a lot of friends who work in places where they're L&D and they're meeting planners. I've never tapped my base in that way. Like, I just haven't done that. But this year I'm like, you know what? There are such great speakers that I just want you to get to know them. And I'm like, hey, just calling people up and being like, do you have anyone you can connect me to that is bringing speakers in? I just want to put this one on the radar for them. Right. And it's like, I think so often, even speakers, I know a lot of speakers who are like, oh, I don't want to bother my friends. I don't want to be that person. But, it's almost like you're doing a disservice to everyone if you're not sharing, again, what you're putting out in the world. You want to get it out to as many stages. You want to, this isn't, you're not being promotional, you're not being salesy if you do it the right way and you truly authentically believe that you have a message that is going to make an impact, right? How can you leave people with that kind of understanding about, take it from a relational perspective, not that you're selling yourself. And this is even for agents. Pick up the phone to call and talk to your buyers because you have the water cooler talk you want to share with them. Like, here's a great speaker you should just be talking about. I don't even care if you buy them from me right now, but know about this person. I don't think there's enough of that conversation going on.
Yeah. And I would add two things. One is, I also would just want to recognize, as corny as it sounds, privilege. I'm white, I'm male. I feel more maybe empowered to like make a phone call that someone else might not be willing to make, or walk up to someone at a conference and shake their hand. I don't even realize it. So I get it. Maybe it's not as easy for everyone based on a variety of factors to be that pushy or salesy or whatever you want to call it, but it's a necessary thing if you're going to be a paid public speaker. I would think, you're going to need that level of pushiness. And then the other is patience, right? It takes so much longer than people think. From when I first meet a speaker to when I book them, it could be 18, 24 months. It could be 2 years from that first conversation till we have a confirmed booking together. So it takes a lot longer than you might think. And so don't give up hope if after 3 months, you're not seeing the results. It could take up to 2 years.
That's great. And to put a finer point on that, Alec, why do you find that, and believe me, I know, because I've introduced great speakers to you too. And we're like, oh, we're so close now. But I'm like, oh my God, how come you haven't booked this person yet? They're amazing. What do you want to say to speakers who feel that way? Is it about you gaining more trust? Is it about you seeing more from them? Like, what is it that you're kind of waiting, or it's just really waiting for the right moment, the right client, the right buyer for that speaker and that story? And what would you share?
It's just the sales cycle takes that long sometimes, right? From my initial meeting, right, and getting to know someone and vetting them, to getting them on the website, to telling the 9 other agents here about them, to getting them to talk to their buyers about it. Their buyers have their own decision makers at their companies that they need to run it up that flagpole. So that's why it's just a longer process. I mean, every now and again, you'll meet someone and you'll get them a booking the next week. And that's like, a sweet miracle, but that does not happen. It's much more often the former, not the latter. And so it's not for lack of our effort. It's just, it takes that long to educate the buyers and the buyers to educate their decision makers. And then for it to come full circle, not to mention the event itself could be 6 months down the road. So by the time you're actually getting a check for speaking from Gotham, a lot of time could have passed.
I love that. I'd love it because it just ties into everything we talk about here. It's education, and that education is about the stories, right? It's about your stories and strategies. You have to get it to your agents so that they know how to be able to share that back with their buyers and vice versa. So You know, Rod, what do you have to kind of like close us off here?
Well, I just think I think from the questions that we've gotten, right, and the responses, even with Alec, is just this to me is a level set, which I think is so important. One, we get to know Alec and what Gotham's all about, but it also sort of sets the tone of the world that we're all a part of, that we appreciate, that we get excited about and feel creative through. And so to me, that's incredibly valuable. I mean, sometimes you have to understand how to chalk the field, right? Where are we on that field? Are we close to the goal? Are we not? Are we sort of halfway there? Because I think we're all in this sort of self evaluation. And if we're good, we do that, right? We're evaluating sort of where do we fit within this ecosystem. So, no, I mean, I've learned a lot myself. I hope that the listeners and those viewers have as well. But kudos to you, Mirjana, for getting Alec, not Baldwin, but Alec, on with us. The Dos Equis man of the speaking industry.
Putting that on my profile.
Yeah, there you
Alec,
go.
anything you want to leave us with?
No, I hope I made you proud, Mirjana and Rod. I tried not to put my foot in my mouth, and I think I did a pretty good job of that.
Well, it's good. I love it. And I mean, you pointed out you're like, I'm going to challenge that. That's what I was waiting for. I love it when you challenge the status quo. Thank you so much. I hope that absolutely you brought value to everyone, I'm sure, who's been listening to this. And thank you for the questions that came in. And again, we'll have more stories in the room coming up, but thanks to everyone for joining us.
Thank you.